All right, guys. We're going to have a short presentation here on plating and different techniques you can use to plate. We're going to go over some basic principles and then get into some advanced techniques that you may or may not use going forward. But I'd first like to ask a question for everybody. Can I get a show of hands of those who are cooking and plating their own food? Okay, so nobody, who's cooking? Cooking and plating. Couple, yeah. Any way you can do it. If you're producing the food and not a caterer, okay. You guys have both? Then everybody else is receiving food from a caterer and then plating it?
Yep.
Does anybody's food come plated? Does anybody's food get served in an Oliver tray? Just so home delivered, with the exception of home delivered, of course. Okay. So nobody's plating congregate and home delivered meals pre-sealed from a caterer or anything like that?
No.
Okay, awesome. Slide. Let's talk about what makes food beautiful. Does anybody have any, can we go around the room here and talk about what makes food appealing to you when you sit down at a restaurant or sit down at home?
Colors.
Colors.
Beer
Okay.
along with it.
Yep. Beer.
Accompaniments, all right.
Variety.
Variety? Okay.
Aroma.
What was that?
Aroma.
Aroma, right. I was thinking of some ideas of what makes me think food is beautiful, and hunger came to mind first. If I'm really hungry, food looks a lot better. Sometimes even food that's not that tasty will look really, really good at that point. Of course, color. Nobody wants to eat drab-looking food or one monocolored plate. Portion size can, I think, have an immediate effect on your hunger, whether it's too small or too large when you receive it, can, in your mind, manipulate how you're feeling. The vessel that it's served in, if it's an appropriate vessel to serve that dish in, or if possibly you're looking at it like, oh, this is going to be awkward, or maybe you get your meal and your spaghetti and your salad is all mushed together, and immediately you're thinking, I really wanted my salad first before the meal, or I didn't want my salad doused in marinara sauce, and now it is, so that can affect how your plate is going to look. Proper cooking technique, I think, is huge. There's nothing worse than going out for a Friday fish fry and then having your fish soggy, and you can tell it's soggy as soon as you see it. Or maybe you get a steak that's more gray than charred, and you're really going for that high-temp charred steak. The texture of food can be a major appeal. I know when I was first, I'm talking about my childhood years here, but texture was a big thing for me. Texture made or could take away my desire for a food. In fact, sushi was kind of a weird one for me at first too. It was the texture of raw fish. Not all fish, but some fish, like salmon, for instance. Do we have sushi fans out here? I mean, you can probably agree with me. The texture of all those fish can really change, especially if you get different varieties. But texture, in the same sense, is why many of these cultures embrace this food so much and have put sushi on this pedestal of culinary eating because of all the variety of textures, flavors, colors. And of course, plate design. Does it look good or does it not look good? Kind of the first feast with your eyes mentality. Slide. We're going to talk about plating basics, basic guidelines to plating. This picture is a meatloaf salad and mashed potatoes with some sauce on it. This is not a meal set picture. However, in the next several slides, you are going to see pictures that are from meal sites across the state. I've received several from several counties, maybe 20 counties or so have submitted photos, and I've used them as examples, not necessarily good or bad, just examples to show how some folks are doing it and how we could do it differently, or what we would want to shoot for. Slide, please. The first principle I want to go over is emphasis, and what I mean by emphasis is emphasis on the primary ingredient on the plate. Let people know what they're eating. If there is a steak and potato dinner, you would expect the steak to be kind of the focal point on the plate, not something side dish. You don't want the risotto to be the focal point on a steak dinner. So I have two plates here. This one over here is first, we're having issues with focal point or emphasis when you're serving in a compartmentalized tray like this. But beyond that, the reason I chose this is because the ham is I assume, is supposed to be the focal point on this plate, and it's small diced, where it kind of looks almost like a side dish, or if it's mixed into it, as if it were not kind of the main focal. It's in fact, there's less ham on here than most of the other ingredients on the plate, which from a health-wise sense isn't a bad thing. But as far as drawing emphasis on what we're eating, if this plate was called ham dinner on the menu and I showed up for a ham dinner, I don't know that this is what I would expect. You know, so a way you could do this differently is that, assuming that the ham didn't come diced, you know, you could serve it in slices, maybe 2 half-moon shapes, leaning up against it, just to draw a little bit more emphasis towards that. And then the other plate I thought was a really good example of a very simple plate, really, you know, 3 edible ingredients, but one of them is doubling as a garnish. But you know, it's an egg dinner, or it's an egg breakfast. The full point is on the eggs itself, and the toast and the colorful fruit garnish is there, but not occupying the space on the plate. Next slide, please. Contrast, plating contrast, colors and shapes are something to consider. This first page, or the first picture right here, shows what I would consider kind of a drab-looking plate. I think there are some ways we can spruce this up, and we'll talk about that later. But let's talk about what they did and why I'm thinking they did this. We could have easily thrown that pile of beets on the plate, added more color, shapes, contrast, but what's going to happen when you throw a pile of beets on this plate? Everything's going to be red. The beet juice is going to get everywhere, so I think this is a good choice. However, there was something, if you look at this, I believe it's a pasta salad, and there's chunks of carrots and peas in there. If we could have not only maybe cut down on the rest of the starches and the mayonnaise in the dish, and boosted up the vegetables, and maybe added even more vegetables, such as a red pepper, and we would have the red, the orange, the green, but also just boosting up the amount of those vegetables, or simply by adding herbs to it. A little bit of parsley in this dish. Parsley is kind of a neutral flavor, and if any kind of flavor it gives you, I think it's just more of a fresh flavor. You can hide that flavor well, or not manipulate the flavor of the dish while adding a lot of color to it. The next dish on the other plate here, I think does a very, very good job. I mean, you couldn't get any better of a plate than this to describe contrast and shape, I don't think, as well as color. Having the fresh watermelon with the rind on there gives a beautiful color transition. And then I believe this is maybe a Jell-O right there, but it's just a nice little contrast. I mean, it's loaded with color and the shape appeal. And then over here with the salad and the dressing, also another good contrasting color. And the soup on the side. This picture is not showing up very well, but one of the reasons I really chose that picture was because of the soup, and the reason I did that is because they really took care when they were producing that soup to ensure the quality of the ingredients was maintained. In the picture I had that I was looking at originally of this, those green beans in that soup are super, super bright green, which is what we want to see, as opposed to what we often see, which is that army green color that happens when the chlorophyll in the vegetables is just gone. And that could happen from sitting too long on a steam table, or it could happen originally from just being overcooked. A lot of the vegetables you get in when they're coming in frozen bags, they're already cooked once. You know, you're more or less reheating them. So let's reheat them, don't cook them. Next slide, please. Texture. So as I said, texture is important, you know, especially when we all go to our Friday fish fries. We aren't doing a lot of Friday fish fries at the meal sites, but the same kind of methods or same kind of principles come through. For this dish is an egg bake, kind of similar, you know, to a souffle. And so this is an egg bake baked in a little muffin tin. That one is from Barron County, I believe. And I thought this plate was awesome because you get this egg bake, which I can only assume is kind of a Southwest maybe egg bake because they have pico on the side. But the egg bake is perfect. It's crispy around the outside, just how it should be. The top, assuming is soft. The pico adds a different textural and flavor element to it. But another thing, even the more boring stuff on the plate here, like the potatoes, they're cooked perfectly. You can see that they're browned on the outside, crispy, probably soft and fluffy in the middle, I can only imagine. And that's exactly what we want when we're cooking roasted potatoes. It's rather than steamed potatoes. You know, if we want to have them soft on the outside, no color to them, let's steam them. If we're going to roast them, let's roast them. And then we have our fruit here. Great equal amounts. You can tell the cook who cut this up paid close attention to the dicing they did, as all the watermelon is a similar size, and pineapple and whatnot. A very fresh selection of fruit, and there's no, you know, slime, juice, nothing like that. You can tell all the color is there. They're not fading to white on the edges where you can tell they're a little old. Just a great presentation on plate. Now this one, on the other hand, there's nothing wrong with this breakfast, but there's a couple things that I think they did to hurt it, that you could have served the exact same thing and not hurt the integrity of the dish. Now what I'm talking about here is the gravy. Gravy on top of the biscuit, good. Gravy on top of the sausage, bad. The reason I think it's bad is because they took a lot of care and time in cooking that sausage to make sure they got that brown, it's called the Maillard reaction, when meat browns like that and you get that brown crust on things. It takes time and effort to get that, and to take all the time and effort to get that nice crust and nice texture and color on it, and then to cover it up with gravy, I think is a shame. I would have left the gravy off of that dish completely, off of the sausage, or maybe put it below, which I think putting the sauce below a protein is also a great way to add a visual accent to the plate and still maintaining everything you want to maintain with the crispiness on the outside. We're also going to take a look at that pie crust. You can see little glimpses of the pie crust around the outside and how nice and golden brown that is. I'm going to throw out a term, it's called GBD, golden brown and delicious. When I was in school, we had a chef de Perry, he taught me that, and he lives by it, golden brown and delicious. So you wouldn't want to hide that golden brownness with your whipped cream. Now you do want the whipped cream on there, right? So how easy would it have been, I think, to do dollops right along the outside here and been able to get the same amount of whipped cream on there, but still letting people see that beautiful crust that you took so much time to produce. Slide. All right, balance. Balance is tricky because we have a lot of meal components that are required that we put on there, which sometimes can equal a lot of different components to a plate, more than you typically would. When I think of a plate from a restaurant perspective, I would think protein, starch, vegetable, and sauce. Those are the plates, or the components we put on a plate, but we're often doing multiple vegetables or multiple fruits to get all of our nutrition into a meal, which is very, very important. But when we do that, let's consider balance for visual appeal. You can see this plate. The balance issue with this is the vessel, not the salad. But then again, having the salad in a vessel eliminates the mixture of food also, which I think is important. So what I would recommend with this is kind of serving this on the side, or using a different bowl if possible for the salad. Just for visual appearance, even if it is a little bit more cumbersome or takes a little more space on the table, I can almost guarantee when they eat this that bowl is coming off the plate anyway. And the next one is a very, very full plate, but yet it is full. I thought that it showed good balance, and I think what really caught my eye that drew the balance on this plate was the large portion of vegetables, okay, and the long cut on the vegetables. These aren't going to be your little 1-inch long green beans that are green and that's it. There's a lot of color, and the length of the green bean is of a good length to really balance with the heavy pasta on the other side of the plate. So is that plate perfectly balanced? I don't think necessarily. It's a really heavy plate with not a lot of white space. That's one thing I would like to see on this plate a little bit more, is white space. But it does the job for the sake of this presentation. Slide, please. Colors. If you look at those two, there's a drastic difference in the amount of color and the types of color that are in these plates. Which dish looks healthier?
This one.
The one on the right?
Yes.
Yeah. With this plate right here, choosing your chicken breast doused in gravy, mashed potatoes doused in gravy, and then the Brussels sprouts, which happen to turn that army green color. It would have been nice to add a little herb to this one. A little parsley would have gone a long way, I believe. And then maybe considering not just dousing everything in the gravy, because you really took away any little bit of color that those individual colors that these two food items had. You really kind of just messed it all into one color with that gravy. So be precise with your gravy, and allow the other colors of the food to stand out. Also, this chicken breast looks like it may have been baked, where if you would have been able to sear that prior to putting it in the oven to bake it, you would have got that brown Maillard reaction on top of it, which could have added a little bit of a textural difference and a color difference, and also a little bit more flavor, because you do get that flavor from the pan. On the other hand here, we have another pasta dish with the vegetables on the plate. You see the salad is on the side. The vegetables have a humongous variety of different cuts, shapes, and sizes. It looks like we have julienne carrots to the peas, to the 1-inch dice on the green beans. That's also really important when you look at your vegetable blends, whether you're cutting them yourself using fresh vegetables or buying frozen. I don't think you have as many options if you go canned, and I don't recommend going with canned vegetables. But the frozen vegetables, there is a million different kinds of cuts, styles, blends you can use. Talk to your food rep or talk to your caterer about switching it up every now and then. If you get people that are sick of the same old zucchini and broccoli pepper blend, switch it up to a different blend. Prices are going to be all very, very similar, and the varieties are endless.
Hey Alex,
Yeah.
when we went back to those plates, when I go out to the sites, they wanna see that on the left-hand side.
Do they?
The bland stuff. Is it in the future, do you think, that they're gonna be more wanting to see the other,
Well, that's
well, these
Yes.
89-year-olds, they want this gravy and
They want
chicken.
meat,
and-
potatoes, and gravy.
yeah.
And gravy holds the heat too, keeps the, you know.
It does keep the temp.
But I'm just wondering, do you think in the future it's gonna be more going towards?
It's already going that way.
Yeah,
it
The
is.
trouble is that we're serving two, maybe even three generations
Right.
of people, and you're right. The older, 80 to 90, 80 to 100, I see that, where they want things that have gravy, meat and potatoes, the old kind of like diner type looking food, which is fine. But I think some of the reason that we sometimes have trouble recruiting younger folks is
That's what I was
that
wondering.
they don't appreciate that as much. So
Yeah.
I do think it's gonna change, and that's kind of why we do recommend thinking about offering choice, because you wanna appeal to, both of those groups as much as you can, but.
Yeah, when you look at all the folks in their 50-year-old or in their 50s right now that are doing yoga and eating organic and experimenting with the superfoods and really getting into the health aspects of food, they aren't going to come and eat this. I guarantee you that. My mom's in her 50s, mid 50s. She's been a vegan for like 11, 12 years now, just for something to try out. She liked it, and you would never get her into a site like that. She wouldn't eat that food. And not because of any other reason, just for health aspects, why, but yeah, you're right, a lot of, the older generations at the site want the meat and potatoes. You said that they don't, that this is what they want though, right? And I would maybe challenge you to find out if it really is what they want, or if this is just what they know and they don't want
What
change.
do you see by the numbers though? You see you have, 150 people on a meatless mashed potato day, and maybe 80 people come on a spaghetti day.
Yeah,
So, but yeah, is it gonna change in the future though?
Yeah. yeah, it's kind of a hard transition to make right now, because you still have the folks that really want this food, and then you have the new folks that maybe want something different, so the balance in there to try to,
I think we're seeing this shift, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, with salad bars. There's a few of people in this room who have started with salad bars, and I think that they're seeing that already, that shift is occurring where people want more color, they want lighter options. So, yeah, it's hard, because we're in the middle of, I think, of that shift happening, and then what do you do?
but let's think about something different. So this plate's appealing, right? Mashed potatoes, chicken, Brussels sprouts. I could take those three ingredients and make it look a little bit more appealing than this, I'm pretty sure. And we can talk about different ways to do that. Maybe we do the Brussels sprouts instead of just boiling them or steaming them to death like these had done to them. Let's talk about doing like a light parboil on them so they get cooked, but then before we pick them up, let's saute them. Let's throw in some nuts and some cranberries or something like that. Just jazz it up a little bit, Add something to the dish. Add a little flavor twist to it. So you're still getting Brussels sprouts, chicken breast, and mashed potatoes, but you can make this dish look nice. And part of it starts with proper cooking, and then another part of it starts with taking the cooking to another level, which this is kind of just a bland dish all around. So, next slide, please. Simplicity. So you'll notice that some of these plates, one person in particular sent me a lot of plates, and you'll notice one thing with all of their plates is that they have pretty good separation of everything and not overcrowding the plate, which I thought is awesome on their part, because we're not using compartmental plates, but yet the food looks like it's meant to be somewhere. It's not slopped on a plate. I think this is awesome. These are pancakes that they did for Valentine's Day, red velvet pancakes. What a cool, simple way to serve pancakes, but I mean, this is a pancake and egg dish with fruit. Look at it. I mean, it's amazing looking. And then over here, we have another dish or another plate with a lot going on it. We have many different components to this plate. It's a lot of food to eat in the first place, and it's just it's a lot going on. It could almost get to a point where it's confusing. I would have rather have seen maybe a little bit more of properly cooked asparagus than all this other jazz on the outside. Focus on quality over quantity.
The thing too, that wood plate that the food's not touching, my husband is a freak about food touching, I'm sure there's other people, so that's nice if there's no touching of the food.
Yeah, and all it is with that, we're not talking about crazy plating like some restaurant in Manhattan where we're gonna go 2 feet high off the plate, but it's plating with some kind of intent, you know? I'm putting, just like some famous chef in some big city restaurant is piling it up here, and he's putting that last piece of fried leek on the very top of it like it's a Jenga structure. We need to think about that when we're putting our eggs and fruit on there. Blueberries are gonna roll, so we're not gonna slop them on the plate, you know? Put them down with some intent and like you want them to be there, and this is where they're meant to go. And everything that happens on this plate between me plating it and it going down to that table was because I wanted it to happen, you know? Not by accident, not like, oh crap, all the juice ran into the eggs, you know? If you wanted it to happen, that's a good thing. If you didn't want that to happen, it's a bad thing. Next slide, please. Those are the basic plating principles. I know that there's a lot of folks that are really already at that point of plating and are looking to kind of do some extra plating techniques. And so I'm going to show you a couple different things that we could talk about to spruce it up a little bit more. For plating, use a plate of adequate size to fit all components of the dish while maintaining white space to add contrast and interest to the overall design. White space is very important. I think that it really lends well to your perception of the portion, whether it's if a plate is too crowded